Today we are in Unit 6, Lesson 3, and we are now going to take our factoring skills from Unit 5 and start to put them into play here. This is where factoring is necessary to know, okay, when we are solving a quadratic. So what solving a quadratic means, what it means is that we are finding the x-intercepts. We're finding the two places where this function lands on the x-axis, okay? So right there, okay? Um, we can still do this by graphing like we were doing in our last lesson. However, we want to learn how to do it also by factoring method because on our final exam, we may not always have access to our calculator. So could you do it by hand the way that we learned in Unit 6, Lesson 1? You absolutely can if you remember that formula for finding the vertex and then plugging it in to find the y value. I'm sorry, the axis of symmetry formula, and then finding the vertex from there, and then finding more points and plotting them. You can definitely do it that way. But if all we are interested in are the roots, the zeros, the x-intercepts, then we can just do factoring and get right to it, okay? We don't need to find the vertex before we find the solutions, okay? So that's what we're going to do today. Now today we are going to use a new property that we've never heard of before. It is called the zero product property if you follow this red arrow down here. The zero product property says if I have two numbers and I don't know what they are, so I have number 1 times number 2 and the solution is 0, what is the only way to multiply two numbers together and have 0 be the outcome? And that would be that, let's say, I'm going to make up some numbers, okay? Maybe I had 0 times 1. Maybe I had 1 times 0. Could I ever have any other number other than 0 for one of my options? And the answer is no. One of these two numbers has to equal 0 in order for their product to be 0. So we use this knowledge, knowing one of them, at least one of them has to be equal to 0. And we test them both. We say, okay, let's let this first solution or factor be equal to 0 and see what happens. And then let's let this be equal to 0 and see what happens. And we get all the possibilities for where these two individual products, when they're put together, how they would equal 0. Okay. All right. And then I do want to just come down here and give you some vocabulary clarification. So roots, solutions, x-intercepts, and zeros. It is all when the x equals a value. Okay. But we are also going to start incorporating factors into our vocabulary with quadratics. And factors are when you have the parentheses after you have factored it and it equals 0, okay? We will use the zero product property to get from factors to solutions, okay? So we are going to learn how to do that today. But factors and solutions are different things. So let's come up here now and take a look at this example number 1 right here. So the first thing that we need to do is set the equation equal to 0. Okay, so instead of this y, right, we're going to put 0. All right, now I'm ready to factor. So I see the a value here is 1. So I can jump straight to my x puzzle. Remember the -10 goes on top and the 3 is on bottom. So I know 5 times 2 is going to get me to 10. And if I put those together, let's say 5 minus 2 equals 3. So I now have this. I have x plus 5 and x minus 2. Okay, that's the best I think I might get out of this. X minus 2, and that equals 0. So in blue, I have my factors. I have my factors. Now I am ready to set each factor equal to 0 and solve both for x. I'm going to use the zero product property. So x plus 5 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. Try that again. Okay, so now I'm going to solve each of these just like a one-step equation. Subtract 5 from both sides, and I now know that x equals -5. Add 2 to both sides of this, and x equals 2. These are my solutions in red. Okay, solutions. So, solutions, factors. And now I'm going to write my final answer using curly braces. So, we have a -5 is an answer, and we have a +2 is an answer. And that is the entire process. Notice how factoring is a very small role in solving quadratics, but it does speed this process up and not having to graph it by hand. Okay, let's try number 1 down here together. So it is already set equal to 0, so I can skip that step. Next, I need to factor this. So 3 on the bottom, 3 on top, 4 on bottom. 3 times 1 is 3, and 3 plus 1 is 4. So here's my factors. X plus 3, x plus 1. Now I am ready to solve these two factors and get my solutions. X plus 3 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. So I have x equals -3, x equals -1. Those are my solutions. And so I'm going to take those two solutions and I'm going to write them in my curly braces. And I'm finished. All right, so that is the whole process for factoring um, these quadratics, okay, and then writing their solutions. So factors and then solutions are different. I want us to come down here and do 1 or 2 of these examples because it includes having to do step number 1, okay, which is um, making it so that it's set equal to 0. So what we're going to do is whatever side there is more information on, I am just going to move the other, like the -21, I'm going to move it over to that side. So now I have x squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. So I did step 1. Now I'm going to do step 2. -21 on top, 4 on bottom. 7 times 3 is 21. And 7 minus 3 gives me 4. So x plus 7, x minus 3. Now, if you have noticed what the zero product property does is you could say x plus 7 and then minus the 7 and then change. You see that the sign is the opposite of what it was when it was a factor. Okay, so what I tell students is once you get comfortable with this, I'm okay if you just jump to the solution, which is the same number but the opposite sign. and then write my final answer in curly braces. Okay, that's it. Let's do number 12 together. Number 12. I need to, so let's minus this 4x on both sides. Notice I'm lining it up where it goes with its like term. So those cancel. They're now 0. I have 48. I have negative 14. Okay, so I'm now ready to factor. Okay, so 48 goes in the top, negative 14 goes into the bottom. I know that 6 times 8 is 48. 6 times 8 is 48. If I add them together, I can get a 14. 6 plus 8 is 14. But I have this negative here, so I need those both to be negative. Negative 6 and negative 8 gives me negative 14. And then if I multiply negative 6 times negative 8, I do get to that positive 48. So good, I got my factors. X minus 6, x minus 8, and that equals 0. Now I am ready to get my solution. So x equals 6, x equals positive 8. And then write that final solution. And remember what this means. These are the two places on the x-axis where this parabola crosses. Okay? Alrighty. Let's step this up just one tiny little bit. So, well, I'll save this till the next lesson. So practice this, what we've learned for today, okay? And then when you feel a little more comfortable with all of this, then you can start lesson 4. Until next time.